My name is Marci White, and I'm going to share with you a little bit of information about Words Their Way and teach a lesson so that you have a better idea of how to implement this. First of all, the information that I'm going to be sharing with you comes from Words Their Way, and this is where I'm getting all my information. You will want to start out with a spelling inventory. You're going to want to use the upper level spelling inventory, which is in the book, since you're working with 5th grade. And it gives a list of 31 words, and it also gives sentences for the words, so that you will be able to use that. You'll still want to prepare your kids for the test. Let them know it's not something they can study for. Some of the words will be hard, some of them will be easy. As long as they try their best, they'll receive an A, and you just need to know what they know. And so privacy folders might be a good idea just to alleviate some need to look at somebody else's paper. It's probably going to take close to 30 minutes to give the spelling test. Again, you're going to want to call the words aloud, pronounce them normally, naturally. You don't want to sound them out or break them apart for them. You just want to say the word, say it twice, and then use it in a sentence. Again, you're going to want to move around the room and monitor what is going on, and keep an eye on things, and privacy folders will probably be a good idea. When you're finished with the spelling inventory, you'll want to score it, which will take a little bit of time, but in the book it has the scoring sheets, and then it tells you exactly how to do it. Just because they miss a word doesn't necessarily mean they won't get all of the points. Sometimes they can miss the word but get parts of the word, and so that counts. So you'll want to look at that carefully as you're scoring, so that you don't count something wrong that should be correct. And once you've given the inventory, you'll be able to tell what spelling stage your students are in, and most of yours should be in stage 4 and 5, where they're working with syllables and affixes, and then the derivatives, prefixes, suffixes, and that thing. When you give the inventory, you're going to want to look at it closely and kind of consider, what do students do correctly, what are students using but confusing, because this is going to be the most helpful, and anything the student is not being successful at is really too difficult for them, or they would be accomplishing that. Word study is really important in Words Their Way, and students need hands-on opportunities to manipulate words in a way that allows them to generalize beyond isolated individual examples to entire groups of words that are spelled in the same way. And the best way to develop fast and accurate perception of word features is to engage in meaningful reading and writing. So the more reading and the more writing, the better it's going to be. They have to have multiple opportunities to use the words and use them out of context. You're going to want to allow about 10 to 15 minutes a day for your practice time. And once you've given your spelling inventory and you know what stages your students are in, you can break them into groups. However, I do know that you wanted to use the same spelling list, so some of the activities you may do as a whole group, or you still may pull a few to your teaching table and do small groups. There's really two purposes to word study. It helps the children to develop general knowledge of the English spelling, and then it also increases specific knowledge of words, the spelling of the words and the meaning of the individual words. General knowledge is what we assess when we encounter a new word, and it also is when we do not know how to spell a word, or when we don't know the meaning of a specific word. Word study is not going to be a one-size-fits-all, and you're going to have to match the level of word knowledge with the learner. One of the easiest ways to know where your students are and how they're learning is to look at the way that they're spelling words, because the way that they're spelling words is going to provide a direct window into how they're thinking. That's why the spelling inventory will be so important. I'm going to share with you a lesson that is very important. This is one of the most important responsibilities for word study instruction at this stage. Most of the kids in the 5th grade are performing at this stage, but it's to engage students in examining how important word elements are, such as prefixes, suffixes, and base words. It helps, this structural analysis is a real powerful tool for vocabulary development, and it's also important for spelling and figuring out unfamiliar words when they're reading. So you can show students directly how to apply this knowledge by modeling the following strategy for analyzing unfamiliar words in their reading that they can't identify. So the first thing you're going to want to do is examine the word for meaningful parts. So you want to look, is there a base word? Is there a prefix? Is there a suffix? Is there a prefix and a suffix? If there is a prefix, you want to take that off first. If there's a suffix, you want to take that off second. And then you want to look at the base word to see if you know it, or if you can think of a related word or a word that has the same base. Then you want to reassemble the word, thinking about the meaning contributed by the base, the suffix, and the prefix. And this should give you a more specific idea of what the word is. Second, you want to try out the meaning in the sentence. You want to check to see if it makes sense in the context of the sentence and the larger context of the text that's being read. Number three, if the word still isn't making sense and it's critical for the meaning of the overall passage, then you must look it up in a dictionary. You need to record the new word in your word study notebook, and I'm going to demonstrate kind of how that looks. Here is a sentence, and it says they had to redo the paper when they found a spelling error. There was a spelling error I just found. They had to redo the paper. So I've underlined the word redo. So if we're following our steps and we're examining the word for meaningful parts, then we want to look to see if there is a prefix. And if there is, we want to take that off first. And so you would ask the kids if they see a prefix, then somebody would probably raise their hand and just talk about re. So you would want to take that off. And then that is do. And then you would talk about what the base word means, what do means. And then they had to do the paper when they found a spelling error. And you would think about the context of the sentence. And so you would talk about how re means again. So if you have to redo something, then you have to do it again. So the prefix re means again, and you do it again. And so you would kind of model that, and then you would show them some other words like join, tell, write, and you could go back and add the prefix. And you've talked about how the prefix re means again. And then you could look and you would follow the steps and of course take off the prefix, and you have join. And so if you rejoin, what do? And you would talk about joining again. If you rejoin a group, you join again. Retell, if you retell a story, you tell it again. Rewrite, if you rewrite something, you write it again. And you would talk about that. Then you might try to throw in one with a word that you're not sure that they know yet. Some of these they've probably seen and heard. So I'm going to write a sentence. As they got closer to the front of the line, comma, her friends had to reassure Hannah that the roller coaster was safe. And you would read the sentence. As they got closer to the front of the line, her friends had to reassure her had to reassure Hannah that the roller coaster was safe. And of course the word that we're trying to identify is reassure. So you would look at that reassure, and they might not even know how to say reassure, so you might have to work on decoding that. And then if you follow your steps and you examine the word and you look to see if there's any prefixes or suffixes, and you take the prefixes off first, and you know re is a prefix, assure, and you have to think about what assure means. And if you don't know what assure means, then that might be where a time where you have to get out the dictionary and actually look it up. And it's important for them to know that when they're looking it up, they're not going to find probably reassure. They're going to have to look up assure to find out what it means, and then put the re in front of it. So when you assure someone, you let them know that it's going to be okay, and you do that. You reassure over and over that the roller coaster is going to be safe. So then you can bring in some dictionary work and you can show them how to use the dictionary. But this is a very important skill, and it's a very important word study skill that at this stage the students need to know. So again, they're going to look at the word that's unfamiliar. First, does it have any prefixes? Take those off. Does it have any suffixes? And then look at the base word, see if you know what the base word means, or see if you can think of another word that has the same base, and think about it. If it's really going to affect the meaning of the sentence, then you still can't figure it out, then you will need to go to a dictionary to look it up so that you know what it means, and then of course record it as a new word in your word study notebook so you have that for future reference. Even though it's 5th grade, sorts are still important, and sorts are a big part of Words Their Way, and word sorts are an effective way to teach spelling skills. So sorting helps kids pay attention to the words and the patterns that are within the words. So again, you can teach the sorting activities as a whole class or in small groups, but since you do want to use the same spelling list, you might want to do it whole group. So I noticed that several of your spelling lists had prefixes or suffixes, or in some cases both prefixes and suffixes. So on Monday or the first day of your week, you can introduce your spelling words, and you might even want to do a little bit of vocabulary practice and maybe even pull in some graphic organizers. Here's one where you can talk about the word and then actually write the definition, so looking it up in the dictionary and using it in a sentence, and then telling what it is like and what it is not like, so kind of comparing and contrasting, so a graphic organizer. But going over the spelling words, then you may want to go over a sort together before you actually let them put, and they can practice here if they're having trouble. And here's a word that actually has a prefix and a suffix, but we're only sorting by the prefix here. So we have the prefix un, im, and dis. We could talk about what they mean, and then we can sort our words. So we have unsuccessful, unsafe, unselfish, unlike, impossible, dishonest, and you could do all with your words. And you could sort them together either in a pocket chart or at a table, a teaching table, if you were in small groups. Again, you could have the words on sentence strips, index cards, anything that you can find, any little slips of paper that you can write the words on. So you can do a sort together, and then of course you can give them a sort where they would cut out the sort and practice sorting. You would want to walk around and kind of listen, or if you're at the teaching table, listen to how they're decoding the words. See if they're using the strategy of examining the word, looking for the meaningful parts, taking off the prefixes if there are prefixes, taking off the suffixes, looking at the base word, thinking about what the base word means to help them with that. You will want them to keep the sort because you might use it for different sorting activities throughout the week. They can sort with partners or by themselves. And then you could also have them do some different sorts throughout the week. For example, you could have them do a blind sort. This would probably be towards the end of the week, and they would work in their notebook with a partner. So they would put their categories and their patterns at the top, and then their partner would read out the words and they would write them in the correct order. They wouldn't see the words, they would just hear the words, but they'd have their categories at the top of their notebook. And that would be a blind sort. You could even do it as a whole class. Since you're using the same spelling words, you could have your students put their categories, divide their paper, put their categories, and then you could call out the words so that they could see, you know, what they really need to work on before the test. That would be a blind sort because they're not seeing the words. They just have their categories up there. Another sort would be a speed sort that they could do with a buddy. You could time them with a stopwatch or a sand timer, and they could record their time and try to beat their time. So they could work on a speed sort. You could also have them record their sorts, so they could record un, im, and dis with their words. Then they could do some dictionary work. They'll have to remember that some of the words may not be in the dictionary. They may have to take the prefix off or the suffix off as they're looking them up. If they're plural, they'll have to look up the singular, so you'll have to go over some of those rules with them. They can identify guide words and even write definitions. If they have a buddy that they do a blind sort with or a speed sort with, you can have them record that information, record some definitions. Here's a word hunt, and word hunt is also an important part. You'll want them to be on the lookout in their books and magazines, newspapers, whatever they're reading. You'll want them to be on the lookout for their words that they're sorting, and then also words that just have the suffix un, or the prefix un, or the prefix im or dis. Be on the lookout for that. You could even have a big chart paper each week with your categories and sticky notes, and as they see them they can add them to the chart, kind of as a word wall or a word bank. You could have them write sentences using their spelling words, draw pictures with their spelling words. Vocabulary is real big, so any graphic organizer that helps them, a web with their vocabulary words, would be helpful. If you want to chart the different types of sorts that they're doing and kind of keep track of it, you could include this in their notebook or their folder, and this just lets them date when and who they do the sort with, and kind of make sure they're doing a variety of, if you don't have a set sort for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Also, at the end of the week with their sort, you could have them glue it on construction paper and turn that in for a final assessment if you wanted to. They could take their sort home and practice sorting at home. They could even do blind sorts at home with the help of their parent. But again, this information is in words their way, and each of your students will whatever level they're at will kind of depend on the activities that you need to do. There's also many games in the book for students who are intermediate readers and writers that are in the syllable and affix stage, or the derivatives, the suffixes, prefixes. So it has many games in the book that you can look up and use. And then it has lots of resources in the back as well with games, and it even comes with a CD that you can print and make file folder games that they could take back to their seat, because it's probably important each day to set up activities, have a weekly schedule. For example, if your week starts on Monday and you go Monday to Friday, you probably want to introduce your words to the students and give them a chance to sort and do different activities. And Tuesday, you probably want them resorting in another way, and maybe even doing some dictionary work with some of their sentences or drawing them. Wednesday, you might want your students to sort with partner, have the partner call out and do more of a blind sort, so they still have a couple of nights to prepare before the final test. Since you do want to use the same test for all of your students, then you will give the same test. If you were wanting to look at your students' individual spelling and what pattern spelling stage they're in, then you might have to do your testing a little bit different, but since you do want to use the same list for all of your students, then you would give one test on Friday. You might even want to review with a game if time allows before you give the weekly spelling test. And again, any graphic organizers that help build vocabulary would be very beneficial to your students. Thank you very much.